Well, this is a very exciting segment that I have for you. I humbly ask that you stick around for all of it because there's so much that I want to go through. But essentially, the short form of what we're about to break down is that I think we're in a turning point in this campaign, in this election, and we're going to look back upon this moment and say that's when things start to shift heavily in Biden's direction. And Trump's hopes and dreams right now, I think we're watching them right now because a few things that we're about to get into going up in flames for his shot at the White House. And that doesn't mean I have to include the caveat that we do anything differently. We got to work super hard and make sure that what is likely to be a very close election goes in Biden's direction. But I do think that because of a huge mistake Trump just recently made, because of two narratives that were really helpful to Republicans falling apart before their eyes, we're going to see the correct result in this upcoming election. Okay, so let's dive into it. Before I play this first clip, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the alert bell. But Trump, for some reason, and this is just wonderful for the Democrats, for some reason during a CNBC interview, this is mistake one and issue one, he said that he's willing to cut Medicare and Social Security. Take a look.
Stark policy differences, obviously, Mr. President, but one thing that I think that at least the perception is that there's not a whole lot of difference between what you think we should do with entitlements or non-discretionary spending and what President Biden is proposing. It's almost the third rail of politics. And we've got a $34 trillion total debt built up, and very little we can do in terms of cutting spending. Discretionary is not going to help. Have you changed your outlook on how to handle entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Mr. President? It seems like something has to be done, or else we're going to be stuck at 120% of debt to GDP forever.
So first of all, there is a lot you can do in terms of entitlements, in terms of cutting, and in terms of also the theft.
In terms of cutting, just not the word you want to use when talking about this issue. And that is sort of a shift in rhetoric. Trump previously, if you remember, he would go after Ron DeSantis aggressively, saying that Trump would protect Medicare and Social Security, DeSantis would cut Medicare and Social Security. Then he says, yeah, there are things you got to do to cut Medicare and Social Security. Now, to be clear, even though he rhetorically would say he was for protecting, he wasn't actually for that. I'll get to an example of that in a second. But also he has made these sorts of comments in the past on occasion.
One last question.
Go ahead.
Entitlements ever be on your plate?
At some point they will be. We have tremendous growth. We're going to have tremendous growth. This next year, it'll be toward the end of the year. The growth is going to be incredible. And at the right time, we will take a look at that. You know, that's actually the easiest of all things, if you look, because it's such a big percentage.
You're willing to do some of
If you don't cut something in entitlements, you'll never really deal with the debt.
We'll be cutting, but we're also going to have growth like you've never had before.
We will be cutting. And then you have Abby Phillip pointing out that his record does indicate his willingness to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
That's not for lack of trying. Trump's budgets in office did not want to leave Social Security and Medicare alone. In 2020, his budget spelled out in black and white that he wanted to spend trillions of dollars less on both programs. Now, today was not an aberration. It's a pattern.
And I will make sure to say that I've talked about the correct way in the past to protect benefits while making sure that the programs continue to be properly funded. So that's issue one. Trump's campaign and his campaign hopes crumbling because of a mistake that you don't want to make in politics, especially when Trump has tried to brand himself as the pro-Medicare and Social Security type Republican and not like many of his other Republicans who openly say they want to go after those programs. And again, while his record shows a willingness and some past statements show a willingness to go after them, he's tried to contradict some of those other Republican stances by saying he's for those programs not being messed with in terms of the benefits going to people. Now Biden has justification to go after him aggressively on this issue. He hasn't really talked too much about, Biden that is, about Trump being a threat to Medicare and Social Security here and there, but it hasn't been a main issue. Now he has justification to make this much more of a main issue because of the comment you just saw there, Trump shooting himself in the foot. Now, subject to what was really effective as a talking point against Joe Biden coming from Republicans, his age, right? He is having too many gaffes. He isn't sharp enough. He's Sleepy Joe. That was a talking point that seemed to be working effectively from Republicans to make Americans doubt Biden and his efficacy as a president. And we've talked about if you could just look at his dang record, you'd realize he's doing something right. Okay. But a lot of people aren't understanding that and instead see the gaffes here and there and the Republican messaging on it, and thus question Biden's efficacy as a president and ability to serve. Well, we've seen recently even that storyline just crumbling. It's beautiful. And the reason is the State of the Union. People saw stuff like this.
The oldest of ideas. I see a future where defending democracy, you don't diminish it. I see a future where we restore the right to choose and protect our freedoms, where the middle class finally has a fair shot, and the wealthy have to pay their fair share in taxes. I see a future where we save the planet from the climate crisis and our country from gun violence. Above all, I see a future for all Americans. I see a country for all Americans. And I will always be president for all Americans. So let's build the future together. Let's remember who we are. We are the United States of America.
And so that speech brought Biden from being called Sleepy Joe from Fox News to Jacked Up Joe. That's a quote from Sean Hannity, which I can tell you Americans aren't going to be too critical of Jacked Up Joe. They'll like that terminology. They'll be fine with that. If you're saying he's too energetic, too passionate in favor of quote unquote all Americans, then I think all Americans should be just fine with that. So because of this speech that we saw polling indicate definitely move some people on their perception of Joe Biden, his mental competency, and his governance, with his policy record moving a lot of people in the correct direction, thinking that it's moving America in the right direction. We also have seen an example of the evidence that Republicans would cite as to Biden not being mentally competent enough. That also is falling apart. What do I mean? Robert Hur, the special counsel who investigated Biden's handling of classified documents, he released his report. And in this report, he said not bringing charges. Those aren't warranted against Joe Biden. But he took all these cheap shots against Biden and criticized Biden's memory and made comments about his age and being a well-meaning elderly man or something to that effect. And that's something Republicans have been running with a lot too. In this official capacity, somebody was critical of Biden's memory. Well, even that, now that we have the transcript, doesn't seem to have been properly and accurately portrayed to the American people. Here was Robert Hur in front of the Judiciary Committee having to answer for the inaccurate nature of one of the most talked about stories in the media, Biden supposedly not remembering when his son, Beau Biden, died, but that didn't turn out to be correct.
And I want to give you a chance, since the transcript is out, to correct the record on an important point. Very sadly, your report on page 208 says that Mr. Biden couldn't come up with the date, the year of his son, Beau Biden's death, when in fact in the transcript it shows that you asked him the month. And do you know what he said, Mr. Hur? He said, oh God, May 30th. Would you like to correct the record? His memory was pretty firm on the month and the day.
Congresswoman, I don't believe that's correct with respect to the transcript, but if you could refer me to a specific page, I'd be happy to look.
And my second document, to clarify for you, sir, Mr. Hur, from the transcription, page 82, the words are President Biden's. What month did Beau die? Oh God, May 30th. A searing memory. I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Yep, and that was an absolutely accurate reading of the transcript. We looked at it earlier today on the show. So this story about Biden not even knowing. Oh, but he's so confused. He didn't even know when Joe Biden passed away. That wasn't even true. He promptly put forward the date May 30th. And Robert Hur misconstrued that and got a talking point to be discussed in the media for weeks now that just was not based on the facts of that interview. A voluntary 5-hour interview that Joe Biden did. Now, that's an example of one piece of evidence falling apart. The broader narrative, I think, is more thanks to the State of the Union about Biden's age and him not being sharp enough or good enough at delivering speeches, because we've seen a shift in the rhetoric, as I told you, a shift in the polls about Biden on that front, as I told you, and in the fundraising. NBC News reports Biden team brings in $10 million in the 24 hours after the State of the Union address. The financial haul dwarfs some of the president's biggest fundraising days in 2023 before his rematch with Donald Trump was set. And let me make something really clear on that. This is just the beginning, okay? Biden is just now starting, in a more formal and aggressive sense, his campaign mode. A bunch of people have been asking, gosh, why is it that Biden's not saying this on the campaign trail or that, or being aggressive enough, or delivering compelling enough speeches often enough, or showing up to enough events, or whatever? He wasn't in campaign mode. He was in governing mode still. Now we're in campaign mode, baby. And the State of the Union, I have it on good authority, was the beginning in the minds of a lot of Biden and those around him, sort of their campaign team. This is the beginning of the 100-yard dash. And they're dashing, let me tell you. And so I think we're going to be seeing more moments like what we saw from the State of the Union that people found so compelling, now that that is the mindset of the Biden campaign. Trump was all out in the media. He was doing his thing since the midterms. He's been running this presidential campaign. Biden's been working on governing, doing things for people. Now it's time to campaign, and that's what we're seeing. And that's why, just with that one speech, we made up some lost ground. Now, you want to know another thing? And we're still on point 2, okay? The age narrative. Another thing that's causing that favorite narrative of Republicans to fall apart, and the criticizing of Biden's gaffes just doesn't land quite the same. Well, it's because of stuff like this from Trump speeches.
Putin, has so little respect for Obama that he's starting to throw around the nuclear word today. You heard that, nuclear. Did you just see Maduro, Venezuela? It's unbelievable. Oil exploration and production in the United States. The Biden border will, well, you know this, right? Even Argentina, they went MAGA. Argentina, great guy. We will expel the warmongers. We are a nation that just recently heard that Saudi Arabia and Russia will
It's the strangest. Can we just one more time, please? Just this part.
We're a nation that just recently heard that Saudi Arabia and Russia will
He just gives up on it. My goodness. And that was just from a few moments from a couple speeches in one weekend. So when he's having gaffes like that at every single speech, it's harder to go after Biden for his gaffes. These days seem less severe than those of Trump. And so the age thing, and when I say age, by the way, I mean everything related to that, saying that he's, yes, too old, but from Republicans, that means that he's also not mentally competent enough and he can't speak effectively enough, right? There's a broader narrative to that. Okay, so then what do they have left? Well, the border, right? They can go after Biden for the border. Not so much. Let me read you a news article, then I'll talk about that more broadly. USA Today reports, U.S. Senator James Lankford has again been on the receiving end of backlash from his own party because of his work on the bipartisan immigration package. Lankford was censured by the Oklahoma County Republican Party on Saturday over his work on the massive border security and foreign aid deal. And then it notes that Lankford joined Jake Tapper on CNN and said, I was listening to the president, and obviously, as he was walking through, and I can hear my colleagues around me saying none of that is true. I was actually listening to the president and thinking, no, that part is actually true about the border bill, and that's referring to the moment where he's sitting there and his colleagues are booing, and he goes, that's true to what Biden was saying. So this is an example of a broader story about how Biden, along with Langford, now Langford is getting backlash because of it, are willing to work on actual solutions when it comes to the border. MAGA Republicans at the direction of Donald Trump obstructing this once in a lifetime legislation on the border. And that is something independents, people concerned about the border who aren't just MAGA cultists, are not gonna like when it comes to their perception of Trump. And if you care about that issue, if it's a motivator for you, if it's one of your top issues, how could you possibly vote for the party that's blocking the very solution to the issue? If you were reasonable, you wouldn't. And news stories about Langford getting censured because he was working on a solution with Biden, that's going to work in Biden's favor. Maybe not Langford in the MAGA Republican Party of today, but definitely Biden's. So Trump coming out, saying something about cutting Medicare and Social Security, devastating. We know how much people care, as they should, about Medicare and Social Security. The age conversation just isn't landing like it used to because of Biden's State of the Union address. And now Fox News viewers are hearing Fox News hosts saying that Biden's too jacked up and too energetic at that speech. So clearly he's not Sleepy Joe, at least in that situation. And then the border conversation, it just doesn't land with people as it used to because Republicans are the ones obstructing potential solutions. That is devastating for Trump's campaign. And Biden's now out there campaigning in full campaign mode. As I said, I'm optimistic. I think Trump's campaign should be terrified. Biden's destroying him in fundraising, not to mention crime plummeting. That's also an issue Republicans really try to hit Biden on. People are going to see that in their communities, hopefully, and vote accordingly. And the economy is getting stronger and stronger. And while there are still real issues, hopefully people will feel that impact in their lives and vote accordingly. Make sure you are subscribed to this YouTube channel.